Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Influential Nonprofit. Of course, I'm your host. I'm Maryanne Dersch, owner and chief excitement officer of Courageous Communication. And I'm here with Matt Nash from the Blackbaud Giving Fund. And we're going to talk about something we haven't talked about yet on this podcast, which is, my content, Matt. I'm about mindset and all of the things. But I feel like our mindset has been going a little crazy because of all the policy shifts and changes to funding that either have been made or will be made next year. And you're going to be here to help us understand what nonprofits can do about that, correct?
That sounds great. Yes, correct.
So tell me just a little bit about who you are and the Giving Fund, and then we'll get into actionable steps around these policy shifts.
Sure. So my name is Matt Nash. I'm the executive director of the Blackbaud Giving Fund. And the Blackbaud Giving Fund is a donor advised fund sponsor that supports a couple of key business areas of Blackbaud. One is corporate workplace giving. So that's we're the donor advised fund behind a workplace giving program, so employees can give, and the company will match it, and our fund sends those funds out to nonprofits all over the world. And then the other one is that we support peer-to-peer fundraising activities through Blackbaud's Just Giving program in the United States. And so that would be, a typical peer-to-peer fundraising campaign that a person would organize to fund a nonprofit. And again, we'd be the donor advised fund sponsor that supports the movement of those funds from the donors to the charities that would receive them.
Awesome. And so tell me about what we're going to talk about is the actionable steps that nonprofits can take with the policy changes that are ahead. So first of all, what are some of the biggest policy changes that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think that let's start with the big beautiful bill, because I think that's the most important one. And there's some actually positive things happening out of that bill that I think can be helpful for nonprofits. And then a few other items that we need to be careful about how we manage for and turn something into an opportunity for us. So let's start with, I think the most important one is that the individual contribution, the 1,000 for an individual and 2,000 for a filing jointly, is a deduction that is available to anybody starting in 2026, that even if they don't itemize deductions on their taxes. And so I think this is a really big deal for the mid-level donors and for the mid-level nonprofits, because it's a great opportunity. It starts in the tax year 2026, so it's not available this year, but I think there's things that people can do to shout from the rooftops that this thing is coming, because it's, sometimes hard to wake up donors and make sure they're aware of all the different advantages that they can get. And to me, this is a big one, because, somebody who's, giving to charity or even supporting, typical peer-to-peer fundraising that doesn't involve charities. Now you've got a deduction available for anybody who's donating to a charity up to $1,000 for an individual. And that's a lot of money for a mid-level donor to be giving away, and for nonprofits to be receiving in bulk with many of those people. So I think the key there is stewardship of these donors that you have, and begin helping them know now that starting next year, this deduction is available to them, and it will allow them to hopefully amplify their giving a little bit because they can afford to give more.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just so happy there's some good things happening because is there any other good things happening? Or are we going to go straight to the heartache?
No. I've got a couple other good ones.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So the other one is I think an interesting situation. So the corporate donations, there's now a cap that a threshold that you have to get over as a corporation of about 1% of your revenue. Below that, there's no deduction for it. And what that's causing people to do is a couple things. One is to focus more. These are corporations now, to focus more on what is their brand, objectives here. Because if they can have donations that are more geared toward the marketing and the branding of what they're doing, let's say they partner with a nonprofit over some, set of conditions, and it meets the criteria for corporate branding or marketing, then it's a business expense for them. And so I think what's going to happen is that the corporations, as a result of this, are going to be evaluating their giving programs and how they support charities and what's important to them, and be more strategic about it. Either number one, it'll be focus more on what's close to our strike zone in terms of what we do, and that's becomes a brand marketing thing. Or it's, well, let's make sure that if we're giving, that we're going above the threshold, and particularly, let's say a corporation has a large revenue year, and higher than expected revenue, it would be likely that they would want to move that money into a charitable giving vehicle in the year that they're gaining the extra revenue, so that they can use it in the future years for giving to the charities that they give to and supporting the causes that they normally support. So it just, I think, causes the nonprofits to think a little bit more about the corporate giving. And in my mind, if you have a corporation that you're partnered with, now is the time to really ramp that one up, double down on it, get to know them really well, make sure that you're continue to be a part of it. Because I think what will happen over time is that the corporations will begin narrowing their focus. And so the key is, if you're in the door now, stay in the door.
Right.
If you're outside the door, then
Get
make
in.
sure you get in it, but get in with somebody that aligns with you in terms of what's important to them. It's got to be what's
Sure.
important to you.
Well,
But
yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes. Get right. And
yeah,
we're going to talk more in a little bit about corporate giving, but give me some other positives.
then the last one I would tell you about, which is again a little bit of a two-edged sword, but on the high net worth side, donors on the high net worth side will now have to have a threshold. It's 0.5% AGI. Below that, it's not deductible.
And what's
But then
AGI?
annual, well, let's see, adjusted gross income.
Gotcha.
Adjusted gross income. Okay.
Okay.
So your IRS 1040 statement has
Your
calculates your
AGI, sure.
adjusted
Yeah.
AGI. So what's going, and then in addition to that, there's a smaller cap. It's 35% AGI, where I think now it could be up as high as 50%, depending upon who you're giving to and how you're giving. I think what that's going to do, and again, it kicks in next year. So now in this year, if people are in a situation where they've got funds to give, they will be doubling down on it. It's not unlike what happened in 2017 when the tax law passed, and a lot of more wealthy donors gave much more money in the end of the year before that tax cut in. And it also is a place where many of these high net worth people are going to be adding more money to their donor advised funds, because it's a place where they can move it and then they can give out to their charities of choice over time. But it's a way to handle getting more funds into the charitable world in a time when you can do it now, where the next year they'll be limited to their 35% AGI. And that's likely to cause some doubling down this year, which is good for nonprofits, because again, if you've got relationships with those high net worth donors, the key is make sure they know what you're up to, what challenges they're facing, what's important to you, and what kind of funds you need for what purposes, so they can kind of think through how that would work, from them freeing up the money to make a charitable person and then getting it to you as a key cause that they think is important.
Okay. Awesome. So three positives. So what are we on the lookout for?
Well, I think the lookout for, from my perspective, is not so much what's in the actual tax bill. It's been what's in the policy side, that the government has been engaged with over the last number of months, and they're essentially reallocating funds and rethinking through how they're going to spend, and it's causing some fairly significant cuts in key areas. And we've seen it so far, right? It started with the international giving. Then it moved to SNAP and Medicaid. Public media came
Yeah.
in, and they're also just passed something as another executive order around federal grant making process. They're rethinking how they give out grants in general at the federal level, all of which can be threatening to various nonprofits, depending upon who you are. And I think what's happening there is that even if a nonprofit's not getting directly impacted by these decisions, I think what's happening is that some of the larger foundations are trying to rethink what they're doing to shore up some of the areas that have been really hit hard. And then that can create a little bit more of a scarcity of funds at the very top level, as it trickles down into how nonprofits work. If those funds are being shunted over to try to shore up some areas that got particularly hit hard by these policy changes, that may mean, the average nonprofit that may have been getting some of that money before may not be getting it because there's only, at some point a foundation has only so much money to spend. So that's just something I think people need to be aware of. First, be
Sure.
aware of what are the actual changes happening and what impact will it have. And you might be in the line of sight of that. And if not, then who's supporting you today? And if you have some key big funders, it would be important, I think, for you to watch to see what's happening with those funders in terms of how they're using their resources, because it might be a negative cause to you as you move forward.
Yeah, it might be good to reach out to the foundation partners just to see, if they are changing their priorities, because it does make sense that they want to shore up or, make up gaps of where some of the funding has gone.
Yeah,
I know, like organizations and colleagues of mine here locally, especially one that works with unhoused people. There's a lot of conditions now, and like the money, federal money, like they want drug testing. Like it's getting very complicated, and it's downright depressing. I mean, it is. It's just a
yeah,
tough time. It can be a tough time. But I think it also, and not to make light of anything, because I know that there are people that are struggling or very worried. And also, as we learned in COVID, sometimes the crisis brings opportunity, and this could be an opportunity to really think about building your community of support, right? Rethinking how the funds come down. And
yeah.
I
It was just
think I just want to say one thing: public
yeah,
broadcasting, I think really, I think is as is what I see is like them saying, okay, you know what, you're not going to give us this. We'll just like they have the support and love of people, and asking their donors to step up and building that so they don't need that as much anymore.
yes, I was just going to say the key, I think, for a nonprofit is if you know that you're going to be impacted by these things, don't be afraid to tell your donors that,
Yeah.
because the donors will want to help, and if to the degree they can, and the better and the more clarity that you can have in terms of here's what we've been doing, here's the impact we've been having, and this change has now caused this difference for us. And we can't do these things unless we backfill those funds. That can be a rallying cry for
Yeah.
donors, and particularly for donors who've held some money aside for these kind of rainy day situations. Now is the time to tap on those folks' shoulders and say, "Hey, we've been
Right.
talking about this for a long time. Now is the time I need you, and I need you to step up and help us because we're trying to get done these
Yes.
important
And
services that we're offering."
two things from the marketing communications perspective, which is trust your donors, right? Like just trust them, and tell the transparent, authentic story. Because I think sometimes like, oh, that we might look like this, or like no, like just that's my philosophy, and that's what I hear you saying is just tell them what's going on. And the second thing is like what we learned in COVID is, and also like in 2008 in the housing crisis, because I've been around a long time, I've seen a lot of situations come and go. You probably do.
Yeah,
But we learned that, one of the ways that people felt out of control, or felt like one of the ways that they felt, I don't want to say in control, but they felt like what they did mattered, was to donate, right? And you see people suffering, and you see things like, hey, I can help, right? And so it helps them feel like they are making things better when everything seems a little bit out of control. And I would not, from a marketing communications perspective, it's I think sometimes we say, I just did an episode about this a couple weeks ago. Can I ask people for money during a crisis? And it's like, absolutely, because philanthropy is a gift, right? And philanthropy, and if they can't do it, they can't do it. That's okay. And a lot of times they want to do it because of just one of the reasons that you said, is that because they see the problem and they can be part of a solution to so many things that are going wrong. And so I if you have the philosophy that fundraising is a gift and and contributing to the betterment of mankind is our highest, as our highest value, then why wouldn't we want to do that anytime, to the point that we can?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're right, and I think it's important that we can give in times of a crisis, and it's the right thing to do to ask, and especially if it's your crisis,
Right.
you know,
Right.
then it's really important because now you might either severely have to curtail your operations, or you might not be able to operate anymore. And
Right.
those are clarion calls to really get out to the donors and make it clear to them. And then as they're beginning to support you, communicate with them about how the money's being used, what kind of things you've been able to shore up, what kinds of things you still have to discard, so that they know what their money is helping you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And great. And they understand the value that you bring and how they can support that. And that is communication 101. And I think that sometimes we like, oh, is it a good time? And you just have to say what's going on. One of the things I want to shift a little bit, because one of the things that we talked about earlier was corporate giving. And I think there's some real opportunity coming, which I think is surprising. I feel like corporate giving is sort of this elusive thing that everybody wants, but very few can actually get, like really know
Yeah.
how to get. Um, and and also that there are some opportunities here to connect with and build up your corporate giving program. So what can you, as we're coming into fourth quarter, which is so crazy because it's September, um, what do you feel like nonprofits can do to drive some corporate giving in the next 4 or 5 months, even knowing that these changes are coming, in the next couple year or so?
Right, right. So, first of all, just as a statistic, there's about 27 million employees that are have access to these corporate giving programs throughout the United States, and it's thousands of different companies. And so, it's a marketplace for the nonprofits that many nonprofits aren't really totally aware of. And in my mind, that's a lot of people. And 20,
Yeah.
and there's billions of dollars being spent through that, and almost all of those people who are giving have a company match attached to it, and so you're able to amplify the giving. And so just the corporate giving side alone, just if you don't even think about their foundations, you just think about the employee side, it's a great opportunity to get relationships with donors and create relationships with new donors that want to give because they want to feel a part of something within their corporation. That's why the companies do this. It's all about employee engagement and having the employees feel like where they work is an important place, and that the ability to give, the ability to volunteer is a component of that. Their sense of well-being that they have where they work, and that keeps employees working there, and then you get
Yeah.
less turnover and it's less expensive. So there's like real business reasons why all this happens. So the key for me is that I think there's some what I'll call hygiene things that a nonprofit should be doing right now, to make sure that they capture a lot of the giving at the end of the year. Because frankly, most corporations, if they hold special campaigns, giving campaigns or volunteer campaigns, it begins in September. It starts in September, goes through the end of the year. That's the big season for us when we manage these corporate campaigns. And you need to make sure you're seen. And every one of these platforms that exist, like the Blackbaud Giving Fund, we have something called MPO Connect, and all that is it's a platform that we use to keep track of the nonprofits, and it's a free service for us. We just allow all the nonprofits to have access to this, and what we do in there is that the nonprofits can tell a little bit of story about themselves. It ranges anything from simply putting your logo on the platform so people recognize exactly who you are. Because number one, you'd be amazed how many nonprofits sound very similar, and so somebody could give money to the wrong place. So the logo is really important. You can tell your story. You can tell what kind of campaigns you have going on. You can even provide volunteer activities. And so the key, I think, would be number one, make sure that you're up to date with these platforms and that the information being shared is the information that you want to share. Because what happens is it's totally transparent. It goes right through to the donor when they're on their system calling up to say, I want to give in Chapel Hill, North Carolina this year. They're going to see directly what the nonprofits said about themselves in that platform. So that's one. Number two is that if you are working with a corporation, now is the time to really make sure that the things you're doing, like let's say you're going to be doing a campaign with them and you're running a volunteer effort, really work hard to make sure that volunteer effort works great, because that just creates a whole aura among the employees of, wow, that was a great experience. What a fantastic organization. Wasn't that a great day? We felt like we contributed and got, something done for them that helped them. And it just creates a sense of, and I want to give to them because they do some great work. And so the whole idea here is if you're engaged with a corporation now, this is the time to really shine. It's not the time to make mistakes and do things, like halfway because it's hard to spend the time doing it, because this is when they're coming. And it's very important that you make sure you perform well and that the relationship between you and that corporation and their employees is, continues to be really strong, because then that builds from year to year.
Right.
Many of these corporations, they don't have big staffs to do all this stuff. We work with corporations that are hundreds of thousands of people large, and they'll have one or two people in their CSR department. That's corporate social responsibility. So they have to leverage themselves, and they often leverage their employees to help organize these campaigns. And so if the employees are the ones that seeing you directly as a nonprofit, they're taking that back into the work that
Yeah.
they're doing, next year to improve it and say, hey, this charity here was our first time to volunteer for. It was very successful. Let's double down and let's see if we can double the number of people that are engaged with that charity next year. And that just adds to the whole relationship
Yeah.
component.
So one of the things that, when I work with clients and coaching people that we work on is, the influence, which is what we do here at the Influential Nonprofit. So when I'm of value to you, you'll be of value to me. So when you're building a relationship, it's like, oh, what can you give me? What can this corporation do for me? It was like, no, actually, it's what can I do for you? How can I support you? And like, I just want to give a quick example of what this could look like. Which is one of my clients, is Annie's Hope. They do grief support for kids. They would go to corporations and say, hey, do you do any kind of programming for your employees? And like, oh yeah, we always like to offer, learning opportunities. So they did something on grief and grieving and how to support somebody in grief. And not asking, just giving these really good information of value about grief. And because that's what they're experts in. And then, from there, oh gosh, now they have this great relationship, with this company. This is a big construction company in St. Louis. And I'm thinking, and now the giving committee is like, oh, hey, tell me more about you. And they wound up getting a meeting with the giving committee and then wound up being a part of the giving campaign. But that just started with, hey, would you be interested in, and because that was, again, I think there was one or two people responsible for all of this, right? And it's like, absolutely, we would love that, and then they just came and did a lunch thing, very simple lunch thing. You're like, no. But that's how we grow organically, right? Like, because
Right.
getting to know each other over time. And like we're talking about the next 4 to 5 months, and that's a short-term space. So, and relationship building is a long play. And so, but I would say this is the time to leverage those relationships that you have, because, again, you're right, the strength of them, if like those volunteer opportunities are going well, everything, the vibes are good, that, that's great. And, okay, I think a lot of times we're like, oh, it's going to take me so much to do the volunteering. Oh, but I just know when I'm of value to you, you'll be of value to me. Eventually, right? That's how we strengthen the relationship. And
Yeah.
thinking of ways, how can my nonprofit be of value? Whether it's helping parents, helping your aging parents, like they're like we all have, I'm just saying we all have expertise to share. That might be
Right.
a great way to start a relationship by just
Yeah.
asking, hey, do you ever put on any programming for your employees? Would you ever be interested in learning about this, whatever it is?
Yeah, you got to get past the check the box for both the corporation and the nonprofit,
Yeah,
right? So that the check the box for the corporation is we got a bunch of volunteer activities next month. Sign up, and I'm an employee. I ask my friend, hey, which one do you want to do? We sign up. May not even know what we're getting ourselves into.
sure.
That's a check the box, right? On the nonprofit side, it's like, well, the corporation wants us to, put together a volunteer project. So you create some volunteer project that's just off on the side, has nothing to do with your core mission. And then so then the employees come in, they're underwhelmed, you're underwhelmed, and it falls flat. Now,
Yeah,
contrast that with some of the things that you just described, where the employees go in and say, "Wow, this is really interesting," and I had no idea. I've just learned a ton. It's pulling you in. It's
yeah,
pulling you in.
yeah. Um, it is. And relationship building there's an art and science to it, and it takes time. And so this would be the time to, reach out and shore that up. All right. I also feel like I'm in St. Louis, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on the bigger companies like in your community, where I think the real opportunity is the small to mid-sized corporations that either people don't know about or they overlook. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows the big guys, and
Right.
and and I think those are, I don't know, maybe not, that those may be harder to get into. But what is the opportunity for like the small and medium corporation and upping that their giving?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and first of all, there's a lot more of them than there are big companies.
Exactly.
Right?
And a lot less people, like, and a lot less nonprofits vying for their
Correct.
attention.
And fewer layers to go through in the corporation to get to some
Exactly.
sort of decision maker. So I think there's a lot of good happening from there. Here's the way I look at it is that I'll tend to think more about a mid-sized company because a mid-sized company then could support bringing employees, and they've got groups
And
that
by
that
definition,
could.
what would a mid-size
Well,
be?
I'll just go with like a standard mid-cap, ruling in financial services. So say something, a capitalization less than $5 billion,
Gotcha.
under $1 billion in revenue, right? Because up to that point, you're still talking a company that might have 3 to 4 thousand people in it. It's not like it's a massive, organization that you can't even find anybody, but yet there's enough critical mass of people there that you can create a relationship with. So to me, that's
Right.
the key. And I see two flavors of them that really represent success. One is somebody who's got a what I'll call a more of a local or regional presence. You mentioned it, the smaller companies or the mid-sized companies in St. Louis. And the perfect case example for that is a regional bank, right? What does a regional bank do? A regional bank serves the community, right? And so they're to their benefit to give back to that community because the community are their customers. They're
Right.
helping businesses grow. They're helping people get houses. They're helping people finance their kids' education. They're basically intertwined with the community. And so there are quite a few mid-level companies that are of that ilk where they're so connected to the community. So then as a nonprofit, what you're doing is you're wanting to commit to them or connect with them around, well, what do you do to help the community? And if those things align, then you got a great chance of creating a relationship with them.
Right. Right.
And a lot of times, then when you look at who's giving to you, they're your neighbors. I mean, they're the people that live in your community. Or they might be community leaders that you recognize the name when you're looking in your databases. And so those kind of corporations are really great to create relationships with, particularly if you're a small to mid-sized nonprofit that does local work. It's already beginning to create that connection between you and the corporation. So that's one. The other one is a corporation that will really pick a particular topic. So as an example, think Warby Parker. When they give back, it's all about vision health, right? So
Right.
if you're a nonprofit that's in that, kind of area that does services for people for, eyeglasses and prescriptions, checkups, those kinds of things, it's a great connection point. And so when we're doing research for these corporations, it's very easy to find out what they're all about. You just take an AI tool and you type in the name of the company and you say, what's their social good strategy, or what's important to them socially good, it up pops all kinds of information about them. So we've never had a time when it's been easier for a nonprofit to learn what the corporations are about, because the information is so much more available than it ever has been in the past. And from there, then you just you work either who's given to us from that company, and you could go back to them and say, hey, we're looking to create more of a relationship. Do you know anybody? Or you can even look at public knowledge bases and find out who's running the programs, and it gives you an access point. And but it's key. Your cause needs to match what they're all about, right? Because that's what's going to grab their attention. If your cause doesn't have anything to do with it, it's unlikely you're going to make any progress.
Right. 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 It's all about alignment. It is, it's about the honest alignment, the values, right? If our values match,
Right.
because one of the philosophies that I work with is we can't make somebody care, right? Or try to convince somebody. It's like, hey, do our values align? Great, let's talk about it. If not, that's totally okay.
Right.
And I think, and this is just from my experience, is what I see is folks trying to get somebody to care about a cause instead of looking for that natural affinity and alignment that they already have and building off of that. If you're working with, unhoused people, or like my friend at what she at Home Sweet Home, you're going to go for maybe construction or furniture companies, or, people like people who understand the value of a furnished home.
Right.
Hey, well, what companies are around that, and then go from there, because it's a lot easier to build a relationship on shared values in any situation, personal, fundraising, whatever,
Right.
right? That's
Right.
how that's how relationships are built, on a shared values. And I think that there is more opportunity than people realize in this. I do think it does take some time, and it's always a good time to start. And I think especially, and I'm interested, with the changes coming, we are talking about, hey, what can we do in the next 4 to 5 months? But also I think there's a lot to start thinking about this with the shifts in the policies in the next coming years.
And you got to start today
Right,
with,
exactly. So
give
even
them
if it
what you
doesn't
know,
pay off,
right?
right, even if it doesn't pay off for a couple of years, starting now, again, relationship building is a long game.
Right.
And sometimes we want people to act in a short-term space. And I think, again, what we learned like during COVID is the organizations that really built communities of support were fine, because people stepped up when called upon. Their community said, absolutely, I'm here to help. And so that's why, like, the philosophy is, people come for the cause, they stay for the community, and they feel part of this community, and they will step up when asked, because they already
Yeah.
have that trust and that affinity, and and people want to help even during the crisis. Because it makes them feel like they are part of a solution.
Yeah.
All right,
It's the one time that, donations spike is during a crisis,
right.
right?
It's the opposite.
Every
It's
time.
it's opposite of what people think, right? People like, oh, I can't ask, but actually donations go up. And again, because people want to be part of the solution. And
Right.
they see something like public radio or a public broadcasting, and you're like, no, wait, hold on. Maybe I've been taking this for granted a little bit, or sitting on the sidelines. Now it's time for me to just give a little, even if I haven't, or if I'm giving, give a little more. All right. Anything else you want to add about what we can do to prepare ourselves for the future here?
Well, you were talking about art and science a minute ago, and there's one science component I would reference, which is, as you're looking at your database and the people who are giving in there, there's information about those people that could be important to you. You can identify who owns donor advised funds, right? And if you
Mhm.
find a donor advised fund donor, there's other funds behind what they've given you already, because that's what a donor advised fund is. It's a money set aside for giving. There's these platforms that I mentioned that these corporate giving organizations support, they identify the employees. And so, when the Blackbaud Giving Fund sends out a check or an ACH transfer to a charity, behind it is, a list of employees that gave those funds. And so the nonprofits should be really good at knowing who those people are, because that can drive your stewardship, that can drive your ask, that can help you set up, hey, what's coming next year is this individual deduction that everybody's going to be able to take advantage of, just making sure you're aware. So as you start your year, you know that you can be giving, and it's a deductible giving. Those things are important. And the science of it is pretty simple. You go in your database and you look at and you understand what's in there.
Right. And you find those people and connect to them individually. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. And also, I would just really recommend it's NPO Connect, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll put the link in the show notes and all of that, but that's free for nonprofits to go in there, right? And register. Just
Yes.
explain that really quickly one more time.
So it's the way we keep track of nonprofits. It starts with the IRS, master database. So all the nonprofits in the United States, their 501(c)(3)s are loaded in there. All the nonprofit has to do is register with us so that you can get access to the data that's in there. And when the data that's in there is, if you've received any money from us, what's behind it is the employees that gave the money.
The employees who gave.
Right,
Okay. That's
right.
where you can
And then
find
it
that.
also allows you to kind of market yourself, right? You can put down, your causes, what's important to you, the kind of campaigns you're running, if you got any volunteer activities, all that stuff will then be presented to, in our case, the 8.5 million employees who have access to these programs. So it's really, you've got think of MPO Connect or our, competing offerings as a marketplace for yourself if you're a
Yeah.
nonprofit, right? And so if you're acting in a marketplace, you want to make sure you're bringing your best foot forward. And so I would recommend you go in and try to make sure you put your best foot forward.
That's awesome. That is really great information to have. And yeah, y'all just do it. No reason not to do this, right? Matt, thanks so much for sharing such great information. This has been so helpful, so many good strategies. I appreciate coming on here and helping us in knowing, hey, there are good things happening, and then there are things that we can do to, grow our base of support, especially with corporate giving.
Well, Maryanne, it's been my pleasure, and I hope that a few nuggets can be taken out of this conversation by many, and they can use it to make themselves in a better position as we go into next year.
Thanks, Matt.
You're
Well, that
welcome.
is it for me in this episode. That was so informative. I thought that was great. Thanks again, Matt. And again, we'll have your info all in the show notes, so you can go grab those links. Make sure you get on the NPO Connect, and we'll see you next time on the Influential Nonprofit.